Recording in progress.
Hey, good evening, everybody. This is a Greenbelt City Council work session. My name is Emmett Jordan. I serve as mayor. Council, could you introduce yourselves, please?
Kristen Weaver, Mayor Pro Tem.
Danielle McKinney, council member.
Jenny Pompey, council member.
Amy Niesel, council member.
Okay, I've got an information item. Any other information items from council? We do have a closed session coming up after this work session with the Board of Elections. It's going to be an exciting evening. It's very rainy outside. I'm a little wet. It's hot and humid here in council chambers, but I'm looking forward to an exciting discussion tonight. But before we begin, I just want to mention that we do hold our work sessions on Mondays and Wednesdays several times a month to exchange information with community stakeholder groups so that residents and others can observe our deliberations. We do strive to provide reasonable opportunities for the public to voice opinions on matters being considered, so we'll pause periodically tonight for public comment. During these times, if you are in the room, if you raise your hand after being recognized, you can go over to the podium. You'll need to state your name and where you live in Greenbelt or in the area, more or less. We need that for the minutes. If you are watching on Zoom, you can submit a question using the Q&A tab on the bottom of your screen, or you can raise your virtual hand. And once again, after being recognized and promoted, you'll be able to speak, but you'll need to provide us with a name. We don't take anonymous comments. And finally, if you are watching on good old cable TV or live streaming on Facebook or YouTube, you can submit an email to us. The email address is questions@greenbeltmd.gov. And so with the public comment, about 3 minutes or less. We ask you to speak on one topic related to the question under consideration, and we ask that you avoid questioning the motives of others. And in general, let's all be civil in our remarks. So let me say hello to Mr. Summerall. Mr. Summerall, how are you?
I'm well, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council. Good evening, residents.
Okay.
I'm relieved. So we had made some strides on the youth center and being able to open on Monday with camps.
Yeah, that's so important. Such heavy rain. It's almost as though something is wrong with the environment.
100-year storms are more common now than they have been.
Yeah, they're saying we might get 5 inches of rain today. I know there's flooding in other parts of the city. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But tonight, the topic for the work session is the Board of Elections. This is an election year coming up, and the Board of Elections has been very, very busy throughout the year, just working on the new initiative for all resident voting, and also looking at ballot questions, and just basically getting ready for the election season, which is starting now pretty much, just in terms of your preparations. So I want to welcome you both. Could you state your names for the record?
Steve Gilbert, I'm the...
You gotta press the button. If it's green, it should be on.
But I think those microphones, you have to get really close to the mic. So I think
okay.
that's the issue with those, is that it has to be closer than you think you need to be. Really close to you.
There you go.
Okay. Steve Gilbert, board chair.
Nicole Shong, board member.
Yeah, Beth Terry couldn't be with us because she's not feeling well, and Allison Gary, I think, will join us later.
She should be joining online.
Oh, she'll be online, okay.
Okay. So, as I was saying, there's just a lot of things going on. So do you want to give us, just before we get into the questions and the documentation that you provided, can you just bring us up to speed a little bit about the Board of Elections deliberations recently?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we're looking forward to the elections in November, and this will be the first year that non-citizens will be able to vote. We don't know how many will be doing that. They have to register with the city, and to date, I don't think we have too many registrations. But they will be able to do that through the end of September, through early October. Tonight, I think we're going to be talking about the possible referendum questions. We have the question of under 18 poll workers, assisting with the elections. We also have the question of whether to change council terms from 2 years to 4 years. That will require a charter amendment, of course. And then the, the general question of whether the city should be divided into election districts. And the last two questions will just be general questions for the voters, and the council will then have to take that, the advice of the voters, and decide how to follow what the voters have suggested. The 16 and 17-year-old poll worker question, we're not sure that needs to be on the ballot, since it's a fairly simple question. The board is in favor of that, and we have a memo in the file on that. The minority that's under 18 poll workers would have to get a permit to work for the city. They would, we think it's advisable that they have permission from their parents and from a teacher in their high school. And since they'll be high school students and it'll be a school day, they will only be able to work after 3.
Yeah. Hey, well, thank you. So I brought this up. I was at a conference, and folks from other jurisdictions were saying that they had 16 and 17-year-old poll workers. It just seemed like a really natural thing for us to do. And looking around a little bit, they're already doing that in Prince George's County. Right. So you have to be at least 16 years old. You got to be a resident of Prince George's County. Citizenship is required in Prince George's County. And the 16 and 17-year-olds don't necessarily need to be registered voters, but they have to demonstrate to the local board of elections that they meet the qualifications for registering in the county.
Yeah.
And parental consent, because there are laws about if you're a minor, you can only work so many hours,
Right.
12 hours,
Right. You can't work more than 8 hours a day.
8 hours.
Yeah.
So
They will have to work both election day and the training session the night before.
right. Now, one thing that I was curious about, with our early voting on weekends, on Sundays, Saturdays, and Sundays, it seems like that would be a really easy time to have youthful poll workers working, because they'd be out of school and they'd be able to easily do the half a day without taking any time off. Now, of course, when working as a poll worker in Prince George's County, you do need to, you can either get service learning hours, which students need to have anyhow, or you can get paid. It's like one or the other. But as far as our current regulations on poll workers, how would that play out during early voting? Because I also know it's a challenge, early voting, getting, having the clerk and everybody come in.
Right.
It's a little bit of a stretch, and having a couple of youth workers in would be helpful, probably.
Yeah, as we understand the charter and code, poll workers, quote unquote, only work on election day. And so we the board, cover, the board and the clerk's office, the administration, cover the Saturday and Sunday of early voting.
Okay. So if we were to change the code, is that something that could go in effect this year?
I would have to look at the charter to make sure. I know both the charter and the code address the subject of poll workers.
Right. So I think this is low-hanging fruit, and I'd like to go ahead and move ahead with this. Of course, we'd have to. What would we have to do? We wouldn't have to do an ordinance or resolution. Since it's already in Prince George's County, we would just have to adopt the practice, right?
That's right. That's right. You don't have to change the law.
Right. But if we wanted to change the qualifications somehow, so it's not an either or, payment or learning service hours, let's say in Greenbelt, we want to do both, or the resident citizenship thing, something. So, would we have to draft an ordinance or a resolution? I guess our legal counsel can tell us.
On the subject of pay, changing the requirements, whether they're citizens or not, is that your?
Yeah, the
your
two
question?
things, yes.
On the, doing both things, offering community service hours and payment, I think it's more of a policy issue. Are we incentivizing the right things, right? I think typically you don't have, if you're paying someone, you're not offering community service hours, because the nature of community service hours are that they volunteer. That's volunteer service. So doing both, I think, would be maybe in contradiction of the spirit of what community hours are.
That's a good point. And also, I suppose you could say that that's more lenient than what's in place with the county. So we would have to actually do something to adopt that practice. I suppose it's the same thing with the residency versus citizenship.
Right, on the issue of paying someone, I think as long as they are allowed to work in the United States, we could employ them, I think. That's separate from citizenship or non-citizenship, because you can have someone that's not a U.S. citizen but eligible to work in the United States.
Right. But that would be more lenient in a way, or different than what the county's doing. So we'll have to get our legal counsel's opinion on that.
Yes.
Let's see.
By the way, poll workers don't have to be residents of the city.
Oh, okay. Right.
Right.
Well, this seems really easy to do. Counsel, what do you think? Mr. Roberts?
Oh, that's nice. Got me before my arm fell off anyway. I think if we want to bring, I think the board has it right. We're going to bring on 16, 17-year-olds in whatever capacity, whatever it is. They need to be treated the same as every other employee, the same pay and whatnot. I don't think you can mix the school hours with.
Your microphone's up.
Mike died. Yeah, they need to be treated the same as everyone else, and I think that's the way the board has appointed us. So, thank you.
This is a good point. I think it's their option. But do we have any poll workers that work out of the goodness of their heart? It's a long day. It's a little bit harder than some people might imagine.
Yeah, I think we've had poll workers in the past who didn't live in Greenbelt.
Right. Councilmember McKinney.
I was going to say, can a student decide whether or not they want to get the payment or they want the volunteer hours? Because if they are wanting to graduate, they may actually need those volunteer hours to graduate. So that might be more beneficial to them than the pay at that time. I think offering them a choice makes sense, and they should have that choice just like anybody else. But I would say that might be beneficial to them.
Yeah, that's what I was driving at. Leave it to choice if they don't want to accept pay. Any other thoughts from council? We can open it up to the floor. If there are any comments or questions. Mr. Hartman, you had a comment? Please, go to the microphone.
Michael Hartman, 2 Cook Garden Way. Actually, my comment is I don't have a comment because I couldn't hear what people were saying. So I would ask that all of you speak louder, or at least use a microphone that actually raises the volume of your speaking, because I couldn't hear the city manager or Rodney or anyone, actually. So
Okay.
can you all speak louder, or
Yes.
use a microphone that actually amplifies your voice?
Yeah, we'll actually do that. What did we do before we had microphones? Loudly? Louder. Loudly. Let's see. Anybody online? I was looking around for the Zoom link.
There are no hands raised online.
Okay. Well, is there any further discussion? If not, I'd like to go ahead and put this in motion. And based on the discussion tonight, if we can have Mr. Deloche review the proposal with the advice. And the recommendation from the Board of Elections was you thought that this was a good idea.
Yes, it was.
Okay. Nicole?
Oh, just wanted to say that there were board members who voiced support for offering the community service hours for students. So I think it makes sense to do either or, like, to offer both, choose one.
Right. And of course, we would need an application, parental permission from parents and whatnot. And also, since they're minors, I don't know if they'd have to be fingerprinted or something, the way that we work with minors. Perhaps not.
We could, I don't know that it would yield any, it's unlikely that we'll get a background check from minors, but they could certainly be fingerprinted. Many of we hire minors for summer camps. Any work that they do for the city, they're always under supervision. So we would treat these employees like we do any other employees that are minors and any other function of the city.
Yeah, I think you still need to speak up, Josue.
Okay, I stated that we could fingerprint our minors. However, I don't think that we would get a background check on the minors. I would prefer that we treat the poll workers that are minors like we do all the other employees that are minors in the organization. We hire plenty for the summer camps, so we would just treat them the same way we treat our other minors. And a point that I made is that we do not have minors working in the city without supervision, so they're all supervised.
Well, thank you. We got to find a way to bring you out of your shell, Mr. Something. Speak out. Feel free. Raise your voice.
Work on it.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, I think the bigger issue may not be the minors themselves, but the poll workers working with the minors, because that's something that we ask, I know, of recognition groups, that if they're working with minors, they have to, those who are working with minors have to go through the process. So that actually might be the bigger issue, not the minors themselves, but whoever's supervising them. So that, I think that's something to look into, how we do that with the recognition groups and the contribution groups.
That's an excellent point. We would have to run background checks on every employee that would be in contact with that minor.
Well, let's not overcomplicate this, but let's have our legal counsel take a look and have him opine and see what we can do to move ahead. It just seems like a good idea. Already doing it. I don't know what they do in Prince George's County if they go through that same procedure. But it seems like we should, if we follow the procedures in Prince George's County, we should be fine.
The county does many things well. There's other things that their standards are below our own.
You speak the truth. Okay. Hey, let's, yeah, please.
Since the poll workers currently do work with 16-year-olds when they're voting, do they not need to be background checked? I mean, I know they're not. I know that the 16-year-olds aren't working for the city, but they are interacting with minors. I'm just curious if that would warrant.
We don't background check the poll workers, but I think in that context, they're not serving that minor in a one-on-one setting. They typically come in and go out the same. They're not hanging out. There's no opportunity to leave the space. So I think it's a different context than when we have other employees working with minors or serving minors.
Yeah, and no individual poll worker is by himself or herself with a voter. There's always two others.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So at this time, if there's no further comment, let's go ahead and move on to the next question, and that had to do with 4-year terms. So this issue, I think, has come up from time to time. Last time it came up was maybe 20 years ago. So What, can you summarize the Board of Elections deliberations on this topic?
Yeah, we don't have a position on whether council members should serve for 2 years or 4 years. If the council wants to put the question to the voters in referendum, then can do that. And if it's decided that that should be done, then it was suggested, and we think it's a good idea, to have another question whether council members should be subject to recall after being elected.
Let's see, if we word it that way, would that imply that a council member, if we kept it at 2 years, could be recalled? And what does the charter say about recall?
No, the charter doesn't say anything about
Okay, so
recalls
it's
now.
county,
Right.
state.
The idea, I guess, being that that within 2 years, that they can decide. That a recall election would take time anyway. I mean, it would also be an expense for the city, and if the terms are only 2 years as they are now, then there's no crying need, I think, to have a recall procedure.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem, I thought I saw you move over there. Did you have a comment?
I was just gonna, moving to pull it up. But this was the text from the memo from the Board of Elections.
Right.
Okay. Mr. Roberts,
Yeah, I don't know about the recall election, but I think there is a need for the ability of citizens to petition any particular issue, or issues to referendum, because we don't have that ability right now. And we also need to recalibrate the number of signatures you need on a petition in order to go to referendum on a charter change.
Right.
Because that has been badly eschewed, and right now, it's almost impossible for citizens to get the required number of signatures to do that.
Right, you need about 3,000.
So we need to recalibrate that so it matches what was originally intended, I think, by the founders of the city and people who set up the charter, that it was fair and people would have a reasonable chance of being able to do that. Because right now, can't do it. So I think that, to me, that's the most important thing we need to worry about when we look at having a charter change or something on the ballot that people are concerned about. So, anyway, thank you.
okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
Well, I think related to that, I believe that's state law, that the state law sets the number of signatures required for a ballot petition.
We can have our own voting system. We don't have to do that.
Well, I think
If
sometimes
you-
we actually do
if
have
you-
to do
if
what
you
the
look
state
at-
says, a lot of times.
If you look at the past, before we adopted the county registration list, it was a fair system. Citizens could, if the council wanted to make a charter change and the citizens didn't like it, they had a fair chance of taking that to referendum. And that's, if you want to have, citizens that are going to participate in their community, you have to have that. People have to have a realistic opportunity to participate in the community.
I'm not sure we can disregard state law that easily. But my other question was actually related.
I think you got it mixed up.
I believe I have the floor, Mr. Roberts. But the question I was actually raising my hand to ask, did the Board of Elections discuss the idea of staggered 4-year terms at all, or including that as one of the ballot questions?
We didn't talk about it, but that is one of the things you could do, obviously, is stagger the terms so that you don't have everybody being elected for 4-year terms.
So you have 4-year terms, but you still have elections every 2
right,
years. So
right,
so half
exactly.
or so in a 7-member council, you might have 3 elected 1 year
Exactly.
and the 4 elected in 2 years or something like
Yeah.
that. But you didn't discuss that at all.
No, it would be 3 and 4. In other words,
Yeah.
3 would be elected one time and 4 the next time, and 3 and 4.
Councilmember Pompey.
But that would really only work if we had a ward system, right? Because I don't know how else we would decide that, because we're all at large. So how would we say, okay, you're the 3 that are up for election this time, and you 4, you know what I mean? Like,
I think
we
you
don't,
s-
No,
we
it-
don't
it's
have
wrong.
seats. So if we didn't have wards, I just don't know how we would do that.
No, you don't need to have wards. Everybody would be elected at large.
Yeah.
There would be 3 3 offices open, 1 election, and then the following election, there'd be 4 offices open. So there would be any number of people running for those 3 offices or those 4 offices. That's how it would work.
Right. And then, okay, and then how would we choose mayor? Because we choose mayor from within the council. So would we have to choose the mayor every 2 years, or would we be doing that every 4 years?
Yeah,
I guess
that
we
would
would have to
have to
decide
be
that.
part of
Yeah,
the
okay.
of what the council would decide.
Okay, we don't have to figure all that out right now.
Right.
Anyways, just some of the thoughts going through my
Right,
mind. Thank
right,
you.
Right.
And typically, from my knowledge of other municipalities in Prince George's and around the state, a lot of them do have staggered 4-year terms, and the mayor is appointed by council still, but only for a 2-year term. Let's see, any other council members want to speak? I know we've got some hands up over here before we go back to Mr. Roberts, but Mr. Roberts is a council person, so Mr. Roberts, please.
Thank you. Well, I think that having the, split and having the election every 2 years and that, whatever you want to call it, is just a guise for trying to make 4-year terms look good. And I don't think they look good at all for the public, personally. I mean, I'm hoping it will pass, it will fail like it failed before. In fact, I think because, the mayor was actually a little bit off on his date, the last time this came up was in 1991. That was the first election that I got elected, and I think this issue really helped me get elected because I was the only one out there against that 4-year term. The rest of the incumbents, and the other person that was, running against me were all in favor of that. And I think that that gave me an edge because I don't think the public wants 4-year terms. I think that's, especially you have no recall, you have nothing. So you get somebody elected and you got them for 4 years. That's too long for municipal. I don't care what the county or anybody else does. We're in a small town and people need to be, if you want, it's like I said, if you want people to be active in the community, it has to be fair. And 4-year terms is not fair for anybody, in my opinion.
Well, thank you. Councilmember McKinney.
Well, if I heard you correctly, Mr. Roberts, if the last time that this came up, it was 91, that's been almost 30 years. So there may be some changes to how people may vote this time. Just saying. And then I guess what I'm wondering is, do we know the percentage of
Please continue. You've got the floor.
Do we know the percentage of cities or municipalities within the state of Maryland that do have 4-year terms, especially if they're relevant in size to ours? Because I would beg to say that if there are other municipalities that are the same size, have similar issues, they are running equally as effectively. So I don't see how the argument of 4 years versus 2 years will not be will be in detriment to the residents.
Yeah, we can certainly get that information before a meeting where we might have to vote on whether or not to put this kind of question forward. My just informal knowledge of other municipalities in Prince George's County, most of them do have 4-year terms. Same statewide. Let's take some questions from folks who are in the room or online. Anybody online? Well, I think we have a question here in the room. Ma'am, would you like to come to the microphone? Don't be nervous. Go ahead and speak up.
Jay Davis, Greenbelt East. I will use my teacher's voice because, to be perfectly honest with you, I agree with Mr. Hartman. Most of you I cannot hear. And Ms. McKinney and Mr. Roberts, the city manager, are so soft-spoken. It's very nice that they're so soft-spoken, but you can't be heard. So anyway, this issue has come up before, and it has been discussed every time we have an election. Council members say, why can't we have 4-year terms? And that's because, you know, when you run an election, it's very hard. You really spend a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy, it takes money, it takes a campaign. But the thing is, you do go out and you talk to the people. And what will happen with 4-year terms, you will only go out and talk with the people every 4 years. Now, granted, most of you are very active right now in the community, but with 4-year terms, maybe you would be less likely to be as active. The House of Representatives is every 2 years. Somehow they managed to do it, and they have a larger district, larger constituency, and it probably obviously requires a lot more money.
Yeah, they fundraise all the
However,
time.
I'm not opposed to having it as a referendum question. And I appreciate the fact that the Board of Elections added the other question, because the recall part of it is very, very important. A lot of people, as you said, might be in favor of a 4-year, but they want the chance to be able to recall somebody who is doing a bad job. And it shouldn't be just after 2 years. The recall process should be at any time. We have had that issue where all we could do was censure, when obviously the problem was extremely, extremely bad. And that was several years ago. I am not referring to the most recent time. So I think putting it on the referendum is fine, as long as you also include the recall. And then we will all discuss the pros and cons, and the people will decide. But I already will tell you that I am opposed to a 4-year term.
Thank you. Thank you for that perspective, that thoughtful perspective. And this question about the 4-year terms, I agree that I like the questions, the two of them, the way that they're phrased. And I think that depending on those results, we might have deeper discussions. But I think the question sort of works in tandem with this idea of voting districts and kind of thinking through different ways of electing the mayor, if that's the intention of some of this discussion. So I think they're all sort of interconnected. Anybody else have comments on this initiative? And is there anyone online?
No. Still no hands raised online.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on to the next question, and that is election districts.
Yes, and this question is a little more difficult to put to the voters because there are so many ways you can. Number one, so many ways you can divide the city. You can have 2 districts, 3 districts, 4 districts, 5 districts, and then when you've decided that, you have to decide whether some of the district representatives will be voted on only by those residents in that district, or whether everybody will still be elected at large. The way you can do it with everybody being elected at large, some will be required to live in a district, but they'll all be elected by all the voters. That's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it would be with 2, 3, 4 districts, having the residents only of that district vote for that representative.
Councilmember Pompey.
I just wanted to say I thank you for the way you phrase this, because I do think this is a question to go to the residents, but like you, when I think about if we split into districts, I'm like, there's so many ways to do that. So it's like we could put a question to the voters, do you want to do it? But that doesn't mean that then like do it, because there's just so much more like thought and time and preparation and that has to go into it. So I think that the way you have it phrased here is really good because it's like, is this something you want? And then if it is something people want, it's like the city can invest the time and resources in figuring out like, how do we do this in a way that benefits the city the most? And that is, you know, the most democratic. So I just wanted to, you know, say I appreciate the way you guys worded that.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, and I would add that I think the way I had been thinking about districts is the way I believe most other places do it, where only the people in that district vote for that seat. But I think this is an interesting variation, that you still have to have people who live in that district, but you're still running at large. So that sort of, that does create a little bit more of a balance, that you still try to have representation of people living in all parts of the city, but you still in a sense have to run in the entire city because you have to be known if everybody's voting for you. I think that has some of the advantages of representing a district without losing you still have to campaign everywhere a little bit.
Right, right.
So it's kind of complicated, as you said, how something like this could be implemented. So, you know, I have to think the underlying issue here perhaps is the thought that some of our neighborhoods are not adequately represented on council. And a lot of people say that. So when you look at the composition of council over the last 5 elections, maybe 6, this term for the passing of council member, you know, we had 3 representatives from Greenbelt West. And before that, we had 2. I guess for the 2 terms before that. Yeah. And before that, we had a majority of residents on council from Greenbelt East, going back to 2009. So this question about, are the different neighborhoods of Greenbelt well represented? If you look at the actual results of the elections, I think you could make the argument that they are. It's varied over time, and I know historically, if you go way back, we had a number of mayors and whatnot who came out of Spring Hill Lake. So it's kind of an open question in my mind, the equity aspect. The other question is with districts, if it takes close to 1,000 votes in one precinct, if we were to divide the city by precincts,
Right.
close to 1,000 in 2 precincts, but it only takes 200 in another precinct. Is that really equitable? So there are real questions about equity, how that plays out in the city, how it's played out historically. Mr. Roberts?
Yeah, I gotta admit, I never thought of the districts being described the way you thought about it, but still, I don't see really the benefit in having a district where, one person is gonna get elected by a small number of people. Because that's what I see in, you look at, other communities, College Park and some of the other nearby communities, people are getting elected by, 50 votes or something. And I don't think that's really giving the people more representation. And I think that if someone does get elected with 50 votes or 200 votes, it doesn't give them a lot of sway on the council to get anything done in their neighborhood, to tell you the truth. So I think it's best the way it is personally, because everybody has to get out there and work at it. That's what life is about work, and you get return from work. And but at the same time, you have to make it fair so that everyone does have a chance to be able to work at it. That's to me, that's the secret. It shouldn't be like you have to have $50,000 to run for city council. You should be able to run a good campaign on a few $1,000s and get elected. That way you have a fair system. We talk a lot about, the number of people that vote and all that stuff. But I was looking at an old news review and from the I think it was 1989 election, which is the first one I ran in. And I think there were 4 or 5 challengers running in that election. We had a 65% voter turnout. 65%. And I think lately we were having like 20-some%. What that really goes to is the fact that that election was before we took on the county system. So we have so many people in the county voting rolls that are not even there anymore. Because for anybody that has done a campaign and has gone out and knocked on doors, and you have your voter list, and you see there's like 4 or 5 names registered at this one address, you knock on the door, and none of them live there anymore. So I think the county roll is so bloated with people who've moved or whatever that it just messes up the whole system. So it makes it look like we have a very low turnout when we actually don't. We actually probably have a very good turnout. But because there's so many people on the rolls that are not there anymore, and it's never purged, then it looks bad. So, but anyway, I think the system we have now is a good one, personally.
Yeah, I'm actually curious, Mr. Roberts, does the idea of having districts where you have people who are elected who live in a district, but the voting is still at large, does that change your opinion of that at all? So everybody is still voting for everybody. You just have.
I don't know. I really have to think that thing over because I think it's more complicated than we think. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, I forgot to. Please, if you could go to the podium. Welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you. Joan Estenson. I live in Old Greenbelt. I have one comment related to where I previously lived, which is Minneapolis, Minnesota, and one comment related to moving here. The second one, when I moved here, I was used to having wards and precincts, and I knew who to go to talk to about city issues. And when I came here and found everybody was at large, I was confused. You know, who do I talk to? And I didn't know any of you at the time. And I had been here for quite a while before I discovered that there are council liaisons to various organizations, which gave me a clue who might be interested in which issue. So that was helpful. But I think that if you're going to consider at large, you need to be better at informing people who's interested in what. And that isn't to say that you can only talk to those people, but they're perhaps the better people to talk to first. Related to Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I lived, they talked at one time about having wards and wards. The council people would represent wards as they do, and having at-large positions. And they felt that it was not helpful because the people who were politically involved, inclined to vote, were already well represented, and having at-large elections as well would allow the politically active to be overrepresented, and it wouldn't help the people who live in the wards that don't vote necessarily and don't get involved. So I'm a little confused about the idea of having both wards, or whatever you want to call them, and at large. I think that's confusing. You need to either go one way or the other.
Thank you. Couple of reactions. Minneapolis is quite a bit larger than Greenbelt, like is Baltimore, other Frederick, and many other towns. So my personal feeling, this is my personal feeling, is that in a city the size of Greenbelt, it's important for anyone sitting on council to be aware of the issues in all parts of the city, and also to be responsive. In our form of government, the council manager, the city manager actually runs the day-to-day affairs of the city. So if there's an issue with the streets or the sidewalk or the recreation department, really, you come to any council member, but we would end up referring it over to the city manager to deal with the problem. So those are just a couple of thoughts. We do have this form of government, which is a little different. I think in Minneapolis and in Baltimore, also strong mayors. I'm just not a strong mayor. I got to work out a little bit more. Yes, Ms. Davis.
Jay Davis, Greenbelt East. Again, this topic has come up so many times, and it's part of the discussion. And it usually happens when one part of the city feels that the other part of the city is getting the most goodies, whether it's during the budget or what have you. And it always kind of amuses me is that when you talk to one part of the city, the people there, they feel that they've been neglected. And you go to another part of the city and they feel they've been neglected because the other part who feels neglected is getting everything. And it's all perception. And, some years, some things go to more, some parts of the city, and sometimes they don't. So that's when people think that there's a favorite part of the city. And it used to be the center city. And now I hear from Greenbelt East that they think that Greenbelt West is getting everything. And then in Greenbelt West, oh no, it's Greenbelt East is getting everything. And then the center city feels, no, we've been neglected. Everybody else is getting something and not the center city. So having districts sounds like, oh, what a wonderful idea. Except when you have districts, you get very parochial. You get very territorial. And it gets more difficult to have a consensus on how to move resources around. Because you want your little piece of the property to have everything. And you don't care, maybe, what other people have. Now, the members at large care about everybody, but I find them, even with the county members at large, totally useless in most cases. Because they represent everybody, but they don't help very much when you try to talk to them. So, and Cottage City, for instance, which I don't even know how small they are,
It's pretty small.
they have wards. So when they have elections, like Mr. Roberts says, 15 people will choose their representative. Another ward might have 7 people choosing their representative. I get they also have a hard time finding people even to run. In our case, we're kind of bound in a certain, our population may grow, it may not, who knows. It hasn't changed much in many years. If we were New York City or Minneapolis, I could see, because it's so immense, you kind of want to have an idea of who you want to talk to and who's going to stand up for you. But in our case, when I was in council, there was never a problem as to somebody coming up and talking to me, whether you were from Greenbelt East or Greenbelt West or Sunny City. I listened to you. What will happen if you are just Greenbelt West? Maybe someone comes up and you say, well, it's in one ear and out the other, because you really don't care. So I don't, again, certainly you can put this question on as a referendum, but there'll be a lot of people and a lot of discussion, and I think it could be detrimental to the unity of Greenbelt as a whole. Thank you.
Thoughtful comments.
Before Jay
Davis,
leaves the podium, I have a question.
Please, Mayor Pro Tem.
So we know that the 4-year terms came up in 1991. Do you recall, has there ever been, I think it's been on the survey, but do you recall, has there ever been a ballot referendum about districts?
About districts, no.
No. So it's come up on the survey, but not on the, not
Yeah,
as a ballot
people
referendum.
have talked about it, mentioned it, usually when they think that they're not getting a good deal.
Okay, just curious.
Jay Davis, I just wanted to, that is an attractive polo shirt you've got on. What is that?
Yeah, but since I was a former member of the Women's Commission, but I still wear the polo shirt.
It's a nice looking shirt. Yeah, and those are thoughtful comments. I wonder, our city, it's not a small city, but, I think it's just important for us all on council to be accountable to the entire city and to be knowledgeable and do the best we can, even though it's the city manager that really ends up dealing with a lot of the situations that come up. So I guess we would be voting on these questions in an actual meeting. Mr. Roberts.
I think my real problem with this going on the ballot is it's not even coming from the people. This is coming from the city council. And, why is that? I don't know. If we had a groundswell of people, if we had some kind of referendum mechanism, and the people out there said, hey, we want this, here's our petitions, okay. But just coming from the city council, no, it's horrible.
I don't know if it's horrible, Mayor Pro Tem, but go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I actually have heard from some residents who are interested in this, so it may not be a groundswell, but it is something that I've certainly heard people discuss. So I think it's not just coming from council. I think there are residents who are interested in this idea. Maybe not enough. We'd have to see if it passed, but I think there are some who have definitely expressed interest in going to a district or ward system. Again, I don't know if it's a majority, but I have heard from residents who are interested in this idea.
Hold it. So, I worry that in a funny kind of way, not explicitly, but it's sort of a leading question. If you ask someone, would you like to have a local representative for your neighborhood? 99% of the people in the world are just going to say, well, yeah, let me have somebody who lives across the street on council. So, and I worry it's not a groundswell, but I'm just concerned that the reaction from a lot of people is just to say, yeah, let's have districts, without really thinking about some of the broader implications of accountability for all council members to all parts of the city. It's just my personal opinion. Mr. Hartman.
Michael Hartman, 2 Court Garden Way. I would like to just a general comment. As a frequent visitor to the election board meetings, and they are open to everybody, and Mr. Gilbert is very generous with his with allowing non-board members to speak their mind. In fact, visitors can do anything except vote, so I appreciate that very much. But I also know about the time and effort and energy that went into these proposals, and I appreciate the council's taking them seriously and discussing them. So I hope that this kind of focus on the elections will continue. To that end, as the Board of Elections did recommend in their cover letter, I hope that the board and that the council will consider the question of ranked choice voting, not tonight perhaps, but take it seriously and have work sessions on it. And so I don't know if you were going to address it or not, but I figured I'd take a chance right now and let you know. But the Board of Elections has worked very, very hard on these, and lots of questions, lots of answers. And one thing that didn't come up, and I thought about it later, was I'm wondering if anyone thought about in order to increase voter turnout. I know the question has come up before about holding the city elections on even years instead of odd years. And I know that a lot of the arguments were that you guys would get lost in the shuffle of a presidential or a midterm election. But that might be something else to think about as far as trying to boost response, because I know it's a disappointment that not that many people actually come out to vote, and they don't, maybe because they don't realize how important the council is in their lives, and all the decisions you make affects the residents and the businesses in the city, and but still, for some reason, we don't get really good turnout, and so those are just some general thoughts that I have. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. The question about changing the elections over to the presidential or gubernatorial cycle is something that comes up frequently. The pro would be many more people do vote in the presidential elections. And in Prince George's County with the gubernatorial elections, a funny thing happens in county elections. People tend to feel that the primaries are actually more important than general election. So some of the issues that are associated with presidential or gubernatorial county elections is I suppose there's a risk that the elections could become much more partisan, and candidates for city council might want to affiliate themselves on a ticket with, particularly with the county folks, which many people think they would rather see. Well, we are a nonpartisan city council, and I'm adamant about that. We're nonpartisan, and I want to keep it that way. No joke, Mr. Roberts. So, and the other thing is with the cost of running. If we were running on the same cycle, we council candidates might have to spend more on printed materials to try and stand out from the other, unless they got on a ticket with county people or other folks. So there's some issues there. But the other point you brought up, just because you brought it up, let's talk about ranked choice voting. It's actually
Your
on the
wish
agenda
is
this
being
time.
granted tonight.
It was next, Michael. It was.
So if we're ready to move on to ranked choice voting,
I think so. Are there any other comments? Yeah, council member, please.
Okay, going back to the question that you had recommended putting as a referendum, have you determined that some members would be at large and some would represent a district?
No, that's
Okay.
that's a policy choice that the legislative body would have to decide.
Okay, just because just from a clarity perspective, I would rather it be the question and then yes or no, and then like maybe an italicized statement if we do decide to go that way, but having the statement after the question on the referendum just seems a little confusing for voters. So that would be my feedback. That's all. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So let's move on to the ranked choice voting.
Okay, so I thought it would be appropriate to do a really brief presentation about ranked choice voting because I know people who are on council might like a little bit of a review. This topic has come up in the past before, I'm sure. And for anyone who's listening online or in the room, to get you caught up to speed on what is being asked when it comes to ranked choice voting. So next slide. So I'll be going over the question of what is ranked choice voting or RCV, a little comparison of the way we currently vote versus what RCV might entail, some real world examples of places that use RCV, particularly in city council elections. And I've also done some pros and cons for us to consider maybe as discussion topics or things to kind of get, ideas to get you to think about like what are the perspectives here.
That's very helpful. I thought RCV, I thought you were supposed to get a vaccination.
Right. Yeah, so RCV, again, ranked choice voting. And then finally, we didn't, as a board, decide what question to necessarily propose, like the final language, but I have a draft advisory question for you to kind of think about how it might appear on a ballot.
Thank you.
Next slide. Okay, so what is ranked choice voting or RCV? And simply put, it's a method in which it allows voters to select candidates by order of preference. So here I've kind of shown an image of what that might look like if you're looking at a ballot and participating in a ranked choice voting situation. So you can see we have the different candidates on the left, and then each of the column across the top indicates your first choice, second choice, and so on. You'll notice here that there's also a write-in option, so that's still allowed in ranked choice voting. And I believe there should be a link in the slide, but we don't have to look at. There's a additional video that if you want to learn more about the process of ranked choice voting, you can certainly go ahead and look at the video to understand it better.
Mr. Roberts, do you want to wait till she finishes, or do you want to say something?
Here, would a person have to vote for each one? Or could they just, I mean, right now, we kind of have a ranked choice system because most people don't vote for 7, they'll vote for
Well,
a couple. So on a ballot like this, would you actually have to vote for each candidate in the line, or
no,
just the ones you wanted to?
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to vote up to the number of seats. You can still choose to vote less, but it would only make sense to vote, the lowest number, or sorry, your top choices in that case, and rank them accordingly.
I need a lot of education on this because
I would.
I've heard it described different ways. So
And there are different ways.
So it's confusing, to tell you the truth.
Right. Hopefully, it's just cut off because I put a link at the bottom of that slide. But that would be kind of a more dynamic way for you to get some more information about ranked choice voting in a video.
Well, thank you.
There we
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, before she.
Yeah, well, I think just on this diagram, this example shows 5 candidates and 5 places, but you might have, if you're 5 seats, you might have 10 candidates and you rank
absolutely.
1 through 5. So I think that's where that's maybe a little bit different. Like this example could also be, candidates 1 through 10 and you rank 1 through 5 if there are 5 seats.
Right.
So in our case, you could have 10 candidates or 15 candidates and you would rank 1 through 7 with a 7-member council.
Correct. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so our current voting system, another term for that is called plurality voting. And the framework that plurality voting seeks to kind of ask is who can win the most votes? So that's what plurality voting seeks to answer. In the proposed voting method that we're discussing, proportional ranked choice, the framework of that kind of shifts. So instead of who can win the most votes, the question that we're kind of centering around is who can win enough votes to get a seat at the table. Next, click. So the two things that go along with proportional ranked choice voting that's different than plurality voting is that the threshold that a candidate has to reach is based off the number of available seats. So it changes depending on what kind of, what kind of contest you're running. And the other point to make about ranked choice voting is that there's a redistribution process of votes proportionally from candidates at the top and or at the bottom of those ranks. Okay. So at this point, it'd be really helpful to look at some real life examples of ranked choice voting. There are 2 different cities that use this. So the first example is kind of a simplified, in Albany, California, City Council in 2022 had an election where there were 2 seats and they had 5 candidates. And the process of looking at ranked choice voting requires that there to be rounds. So in this example, we can see the person who got the most. So this round 1 looks at who's getting the breakdown based off of the first, your top choice. And at this point, that dotted line is the threshold that someone has to meet to win a seat. And in this case, nobody has met that threshold. So what happens in the next round is that the lowest earner will have all the voters for that. Instead, they recognize that, okay, you're not going to get that person elected. So who's the next best person that you would like to not, kind of select? And so those votes are proportionally distributed to their next choice. And it keeps happening in the next round until someone goes over the threshold, and that's how they can get elected. And there's one final round to pick the second seat. So we see that those votes are redistributed once again, and a second person has met the threshold.
So it's almost, in this example, they're almost using it as a runoff because no one has reached the threshold.
Correct. It's a way to have an instant runoff without going to the effort of posting an actual
Cost.
runoff. Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, I was going to add, because this is Albany, California, I actually spoke to one of the council members from this city council, not one of the ones elected in this year, but this is an example of a 5-member at-large council, but they have staggered 4-year terms. So this particular election, where they were electing 2, but then there would have been another election, they would have been electing 3, but they are 5 at-large seats, and they rotate mayor. They have sort of a queue for who gets mayor, and so it's based on the number of votes you got, and I'm not sure all the details, but so this is an example of what you were asking about, Jenny, of sort of the at-large but still staggered 4-year terms. Just adding that.
Okay, great. Could go back to the, oh, sorry.
Yeah, Councilmember McKinney.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask a couple of questions.
Yeah.
The slide that you talked about, the differences between the plurality and the redistribution, can you just explain to me what you meant by redistribution of votes and how that actually works?
Okay.
Like, does it, and I'm sorry, kind of break it down to, is it an automatic thing? You said it just keeps happening.
It
What
does,
does
because when the voters indicate who their first and then
Yeah.
their second and third choice, that's their next choice down on the list is how this calculation is being done by software. So, nobody's having to try to figure out. So it happens very seamlessly in terms of the tabulation. But the way that the votes get moved around are based off of people's next choice from, either the candidate that's eliminated or the candidate that has excess votes, and it kind of trickles down, in a sense, to other candidates. So to kind of clarify that point, let's actually look at the second link. So this is a bigger election case, and go back to round 1. We'll look at just like the very beginning, because I think there's going to be an example of. So in the first round, we see that there is one candidate who's already crossed the threshold, so they're elected. And what happens to those excess votes if we go to round 2? Those excess votes. So what we're looking at is everyone who voted for that candidate that did get elected. We look at all of the voters' second choice, and then we assign proportionally how much of the excess votes to move to other candidates. So if 30% of the people, for example, voted for candidate B as their second choice, and we know that they have, for example, 100 excess votes, then 30 of those votes would go to candidate B. And so, again, the framework of ranked choice voting is who can win enough votes to win a seat at the table. So we're going to remove excess votes and spread them out to other candidates. And we're also going to eliminate from the bottom and redistribute up.
So that makes a whole lot of sense in a situation where you have a whole lot of candidates and only so many seats, or the threshold is very, very high.
Yes, well, the threshold is based off of the number of available seats. So you can imagine for a very simple example, in a 1-seat election, you have to basically have majority, more than 50%, right? For a race that has many seats, like a 7-seat city council, the threshold is going to be much lower than 50%.
So if there were 4 candidates, it would be 25%?
It's actually going to look
12%.
well. So, for example, for a 7-seat council, let's just use like our elections. The threshold is actually 12.5%.
And of course, Steve has that number. You just know off the top of your head what that number, 12.5% would be.
Yeah, it's 1/8.
Very good. Very good.
Okay, so we can go back to the presentation, unless there's
It might
any
be
other-
worthwhile stepping through the rest of that.
Oh, sure. Okay, so let's just continue to step through the different rounds. So we've had one seat elected, but nobody else has reached the threshold, so we're gonna eliminate from the bottom and redistribute those votes. Who are people's next choice? Is it clear? Can we keep going? So we can see that the bottom of that list of the people who didn't get enough votes are now being redistributed up based off of those voters' next choice. And I do want to reiterate that it's pretty standard for the reporting to be round by round so that voters can kind of trace how these calculations are being made, and it's not just a black box. So transparency is really important with RCV. While the software can just tell you who wins those seats, people still like to know how that process happened, and so the reporting is a really key part in the communication to the voter with the results.
Member Pro Tem.
Well, and it's interesting that this only has 8 because the Cambridge, Massachusetts City Council is a 9-member council. So I'm not quite sure why this ends with only 8 elected, to be honest, this example. But because this was one of the other ones that I looked at and reached out, but didn't hear back from the council member that I reached out to on this council. They elect their mayor from the 9 seats. So similar to we do, to the way we do, that the mayor is elected from among they don't have a separate mayoral election. So this is probably the most similar that I've seen to the way we do our elections in terms of all at-large seats and then electing mayor from among those at-large seats, and every 2 years.
And I do think there is a provision that the last person who's still standing, who hasn't been eliminated, if they haven't technically reached that threshold because of maybe write-ins or something else, or people didn't want to fill out the entire choice selection, because they're the last one standing, they do get the seat.
So I have just a couple of questions. Do you have several more slides?
We're just going to talk of pros and cons and the proposal for advisory questions. So,
Okay, well, why don't you go ahead? Because I was going to ask, with this example from number 13, iteration number 13, to the first slide, the first iteration, the order has actually changed of the candidates.
yeah. So based off of the redistribution of votes, you might see some candidates get a big jump, so they might actually rise up in their by round total.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, so it is possible that people change
So
round by
the
round.
person who got the second highest number of votes and the third highest number of votes in the beginning,
Mhm.
how did they come out in the final round?
Well, let's see. So in the first round, it looks like it's
Simmons and
then Nolan, and then at the last round, if you just click on that drop down.
I think that they have these in the order that they ended up.
Oh, okay.
So you can actually
Yes.
see that it looks like after the first round, Nolan was actually second.
Yes,
And
you're
then I
right.
can't tell if, it looks like Simmons was third, Toner was fourth. So if you just look by the length of the bars, so I think
Right.
they already have them ordered by
That-
the winning,
that's a
by
good
the
point.
winning order,
Yes.
I think, for the purposes of this animation.
if we go back to round 1, you can see that it isn't actually ordered based off who's getting the most votes.
Okay.
You can see that third line, that in the first round, that person has more votes than the second line.
Okay.
So she got more first choice votes. Patricia Nolan got more first choice, got the second most first choice votes.
Right. Yes. So, yeah, and actually you can see that someone who got a lot of,
Toner.
yes, exactly, got a lot of first choice votes, ended up being kind of towards
He may have
middle
been
of
at
the
the
pack.
bottom, actually. I think he may have been number 9.
So with his supporters, it was like all or nothing.
And it looks
Could-
like
and
he
it could
is
be-
on
and
their
it can
city
be.
council. I just checked the Cambridge, Massachusetts website, so I think he did get elected, even though it's not noted on the end of this.
Right, exactly. I think this visualization of the round by round is also accompanied by some explanatory text. So if you want to take a look and get some analysis about what's going on in each round, you can feel free to read that as well.
Thank you. Mr. Hartman, do you need to ask your question now?
Something that Michael Hartman, 2 Cook Garden Way. The one thing that I don't remember being discussed at the Board of Election meetings is that in the last round, if there's 9 seats, if the 9th and 10th candidates have exactly the same number of votes, then you are in a situation where you have, for the last remaining seat, you have actually 2 people who have the same number of votes, and then what happens then? And I'm really in favor of ranked choice voting, but I just realized that there could be that situation coming up in that. So I don't know the answer to that. Nicole?
Well, yeah. So let's hold that thought. Why don't we go ahead and you can present your pros and cons.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions or a couple of
Sure.
thoughts as well.
Yeah, so we can come back, and I don't actually have that answer for you tonight, but I can certainly look at that and see what is typically recommended as a practice. Okay, so ranked choice voting, thinking about some of the pros and cons and who it might benefit, we'll start with the pros. So for the voters, this does allow the voters to express give more information about how their thinking is with the candidates, who their top choices is, who's kind of middle of the pack, and who's someone that they accept but is maybe not their top choice. So it gives the voters some greater flexibility and more nuance in their selection. And it also reduces the risk of choosing a candidate who might seemingly be less popular. If you're feeling really enthusiastic about a candidate, but you think they don't have enough support, broadly speaking, you might be disinclined to vote for them because your vote's just going to get tossed out if they don't get selected. But with ranked choice voting, when someone is eliminated, you get to answer the question of who you want instead. The pros when it comes to city council is that from what we've heard for people who advocate for this issue, is that it does actually result in encourage more diverse selection of city council or selection of candidates. And in thinking about what this process does, it's removing a systemic barrier by lowering the threshold potentially, and allowing representation from a smaller, less broad group of people, but someone who has enough support to win a seat at the table, so to speak. From the city perspective, this would save significant money and time by eliminating the need to do a runoff election, if that were to be the case. I know that potentially is the case. Currently, we are asking people to meet a 40% threshold. If not enough candidates do so, then we have to put time and money into hosting a runoff election for those remaining vacant seats. In thinking about the cons, obviously a new process of choosing your candidates on a ballot, it's going to require learning a new process for the voters. And I would anticipate potentially that there is an initial higher number of spoiled ballots or ballots that need correction because of a new process. And so voter education and outreach is likely going to need to happen for people to really feel comfortable and understand what they're doing. From the city's perspective, obviously they need to communicate this new process for the voting method. And it would increase the base cost per election by about $1.5 thousand because you're adding on this tabulation software for ranked choice voting. Now, I still think overall, like if we look at what it costs to just run an election, in the city, like if we had to do a runoff versus just every time, we use a method that that eliminates potentially that risk, then, you come out on top in terms of the money, most likely. Okay, next slide. So this is a draft ranked choice voting advisory question that I've put together, but it's not been voted on by the board members. This is just an example in City Council for something for listeners to think about, like how this might appear and how this might be explained. The question stated such: do you approve of the City of Greenbelt using ranked choice voting for all City Council member elections and amending the City Charter's 40% threshold criteria in Section 31? The City of Greenbelt currently uses plurality voting for multi-winner races where voters can select candidates up to the number of available seats with equal preference. The candidates must meet a 40% threshold of all votes cast, and those which qualify with the most votes win. When the threshold is not met and seats remain unfilled, a runoff election is held. Ranked choice voting is a voting system where voters rank candidates in order of preference. Votes are initially counted for each voter's top choice. If a candidate gets more than a necessary threshold of first choice votes, they are elected. Excess votes over the threshold transfer proportionally to the remaining candidates based on each voter's rankings. If there are more candidates than seats to be filled, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated. Their votes transfer to the remaining candidates based on each voter's rankings. This process is repeated until no unfilled positions remain.
Okay. Mr. Roberts?
I was wondering, has there ever been a runoff election in Greenbelt? I can't remember one.
I can answer that, and the answer is yes, but not since the threshold was changed to 40%.
1940? Or...
No, actually, there were some much later than that. I could tell you because I did a lot of that research when we were looking at filling Councilmember Gordon's seat. But yes, there have been. They were actually reasonably frequent when the threshold was 50%. I don't think there have been any since it was changed to 40%. But there used to be pretty regularly if you look in the News Review archives.
Okay. Well,
Thank you. I have a few questions. So first, and thank you for pulling this together. I know this has been one of your passions to kind of look at this ranked choice voting. So I appreciate it. With the first, with the tabulation software, is that proprietary, or can anybody? Are there a number of different places where you can go to get tabulations?
There's certainly different vendors who offer their own software. So in that sense, you need to get
curious.
the license for it.
Yeah, you have to go to the official ranked choice voting vendor, but apparently there's a number of resources. So it's not a single proprietary system.
No, it's not just one vendor who offers it.
Okay. So here are the other questions. I was just wondering about the spoiled ballots. I was picturing a scenario where a voter comes to the polls and there's 7 seats, let's say it's Greenbelt, and the voter knows 3 of the candidates and doesn't really have a strong feeling about any of the 3. He or she likes them all. So the inclination might be to check 1 on all 3, or it would be, maybe it's a little hard sometimes to make that choice between individuals that you know of and respect. And on the flip side of that is, if you don't know anybody, how would you, or if you only know one candidate, how would you go about selecting the other choices? I guess you would just pick the one that you know. And that's what a lot of people do. They vote for the ones that they are familiar with, and leave the other ones blank. And I know people do that to, so that question of spoiled ballots, do you know, in some of the other cities where this has been in place for a while, do you have any kind of a sense on what the percentage of spoiled ballots might be from people just not putting in the dot in the right place?
No, but I will say, usually in the process, especially if you're voting in person, although I know for early voting, we don't actually scan the ballots just yet. You have typically an opportunity, once the ballot is scanned, to get feedback. Was it able to count what you did correctly? And usually there's an opportunity for voters to make a correction if they so choose to correct, once the scanner has told them that there's an issue.
That's helpful, and that makes sense. You do have that opportunity, and if you leave, with most voting machines, if you leave something blank, or if there's, it'll ask you before it casts the vote that you mean to do this. But those circumstances where, you're in the voting booth, and you know that you support 2 or 3 people, so just making that choice between number 1, number 2, and number 3 might be kind of hard on the fly. It might become a sort of an arbitrary thing. So that's one concern. The other concern just has to do with the practice, the way things typically go in Greenbelt, and it is sort of like that. Most, as Mr. Roberts was saying, most voters will either vote very strategically, or they'll only vote for the candidates that they're familiar with in one way or the other. So with ranked choice, it seems like it would put even more emphasis on that kind of a strategic vote than we presently have. Do you know what I mean?
The strategies in ranked choice voting are different than they are in plurality voting, I would say. But, I think let's look at it. Let's look at an analogy to this. You're trying to figure out, with a big group of people, what you're trying to order a pizza, and you want to know what toppings you want to get. I think you.
And I want 3.
You want 3. I think it's not uncommon for people to have preferences about, okay, I really like this topping, or I like these toppings, and to want to express which, if they're going to choose up to 7, which ones they like more than others. And some people may not have a preference, in which case still voting, that voting for those that they do like is still making a difference in the tabulation. And if there's enough votes for that person, then they'll still be elected. So there's still some benefit to putting down those names. Whether or not there's an order for you personally as a voter is, kind of
I
depends.
like pepperoni, onions, and black olives.
Right.
So you got to have the pepperoni, but between the onions and the black olives, it's sort of a toss-up. I wouldn't want to have one without the other, so
Right,
I'd
and
have a really hard time.
You can't forget the people who are really passionate about pineapple.
Pineapple. That's
Yeah.
right. Half and half. Okay, let's.
I just have one
Oh,
quick
yeah.
question. How would this system be affected if you don't have a lot of candidates? If you only have, one extra candidate, you got 7 spaces, you got 8 people running.
Yeah, I think in a close race, the impact is probably going to be the greatest in who's going to fill that last seat, because you have, as a voter, more control in saying, I'm going to go out on a limb for someone, because I know that no matter what my vote, if that person doesn't make it, my second choice can be picked. So I think, one of the problems that you hear with plurality voting, or the current method, is that you might split someone's vote, but those candidates might have very similar values and very similar stances on things. Just people have a preference of one person over the other, and that vote is kind of split. So this just helps with that issue, actually.
Thank you.
Councilmember McKinney?
When you look at the pros and cons, are there any pros and cons in plurality voting across cities that have different population sizes. So does plurality voting work better if you are a bigger city? Or what are the pros? I don't want to say better, but are there pros and cons based on city population?
I'm gonna write that question down.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I'd just be curious if there is. And then the second is more of a question for the future, maybe a recommendation. Thank you very much for putting together sort of a draft statement. If we were to move forward with this and put it as a ballot question, I just hope that we'll have some chance to maybe tweak some language.
Yeah.
Because in reading it, I was like, I don't know if I would totally understand
Sure.
what it was saying, especially when it says like excess votes get, and I'm like, well,
Yeah.
does that just mean that they're just going to take the excess votes and smooth it across?
Right.
Like if you
No.
don't have the background and
Right.
the context,
Mhm.
that could weigh people's decision very
Yeah,
differently.
it's a struggle because
It
there is a lot of kind of information that you can get into the details with, not to throw all of that down. You know, you want to be descriptive enough that people can understand a process, but you don't want to get too far and then have the whole page.
100%. It's a complex topic to try
Yeah.
to break down into like a nugget.
Right.
But so we'll have to try to figure out if we do. move
Yeah,
forward,
and
how to
this
do
is
it
something
best.
that's, I think the Board of Elections is open to being tweaked, for sure.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, and I think there's also there's a video from I think Minnesota Public Radio that kind of goes through it with sticky notes that also helps a little bit. But another way I think to think about it is, you know, the single winner ranked choice is sort of like an instant runoff, right? That you don't. But I think in this case, one way this has also been described as sort of like an automatic caucus, because if you imagine a caucus, which I know they don't do in Maryland, but I have participated in caucuses in Colorado, you sort of go to your corner of your favorite candidate, and then you see, okay, this person doesn't, and then you walk over to, okay, my second favorite candidate here, and then that my second favorite candidate also doesn't have enough votes, and then you walk and the people split to theirs, and so it's a little bit more like that, and actually the council member from Albany shared a PowerPoint slide that I can send to council as well that sort of has some animations that sort of demonstrate that, of the idea of it allows you to have your first choice, but then your second and third choice if your first choice doesn't win the first time around or is eliminated. So if you really love somebody that nobody else likes, and they get eliminated, your vote, because I think in a plurality, and especially in a single winner, then your vote just really isn't counting for anything. But in this case, if your first choice gets eliminated, you get your second choice or your third choice and so on. So I think it does allow voters to give more information about their preferences compared to the way we do it now.
Yeah, it is a lot of information on the ballot that, you know, has the power to kind of do that tabulation round by round, kind of all at once. But, you know, there's still a process to it. And I will say that that video, I think, is the one that's linked in the presentation. So if you want to look at that, it's in the slide.
Jay Davis.
Jay Davis, Greenbelt East. Historical background on this. When we were sued by the ACLU, and we were looking at ways to put minorities on the council, this was talked about quite a bit. We had several meetings and people explained it and explained it and explained it, and luckily at that particular point we decided, well, maybe the easiest solution was to increase the number on council. So we went from 5 to 7. Lo and behold, now we had a minority on the council. And in the past couple of years, having minority on the council has not been a problem. And now we've got female gender, almost a majority, well, definitely a majority. So
majority.
I'm not sure what problem we're trying to solve here by changing, other than to go along with a system that perhaps seems more democratic or flexible or whatever you want to say. I sort of kind of agree with Mr. Roberts. If you don't have a problem, why try to change it? So in the 50 years that I've lived here in Greenbelt, we've never had a runoff, one way or the other. And they simply did a simple change. They went from 50% to 40%, and lo and behold, fine, we solved that problem. Having this and using technology, software, people don't trust technology. I mean, you can sit there and say, okay, well, now we're going to go to round one, and you change it. And then you go to round two, and you change it again. And yet, I'm going to sit there and look at that and say, how do I know that my particular choice is actually being recorded and changed? People don't trust the ballots now when we have a regular election of plurality. You throw this in, and they're going to be even less trustworthy, especially if their particular person doesn't even get elected to council. Because I can see a position where someone doesn't quite get to the threshold, and then eventually doesn't even get elected. But they were way ahead of 10 other people, but then they don't get elected. This is very difficult to explain, even to try to put it on a ballot question, trying to explain. People are not even going to read that. They're not. Now, there's a lot of people who know about it. Certainly, there are quite a few cities that are trying it, and that's fine. And I was just going over the idea, if you went by bullet voting, because we do have that, and I'm watching the red, so I'm just going to go real fast. Bullet voters, is that going to be an advantage or a disadvantage? Right now, it could be an advantage, and it could be if you could get enough people to vote number one, and you get to the threshold, and nobody else voted for you for second, third, fourth, or fifth, or sixth, but you got past the threshold, and the bullet vote worked. Or it could be a disadvantage. To get everybody to vote for you that you want to talk to, and they don't have enough to get past the threshold, and nobody else wanted you, well, then you don't get elected. But in a plurality, you may have gotten it. Who knows? The percentage is awfully low to me, but that's what you decided.
No, that's the way the math works. That's the math.
It's a statistical.
Also, in this particular situation, you can't vote for number one for everybody. I mean, that's what just have to be. If you tried to do it, your vote would be invalidated because number one, you have to have a different choice. Mm-hmm. If you voted for 7 people, number one, it's not going to work. It's like you're bullet voting 7 times.
Right.
But it's a complex issue. Good luck.
Thank you. Good points. Mayor Pro Tem, then Mr. Rawlings.
Well, and I guess I would say that I think we have had, so, obviously we had our first non-white council member elected in 2009, but then it took until 2017 for the next one, and we still have not had anybody who is not white or black elected to council. And there are people in our community who are Latino, who are Asian, who are Southeast Asian. So I think while we have achieved some measure of diversity, I think that one of the advantages of this method could be to achieve greater diversity because we have not really, the city council does not look like the city of Greenbelt in terms of racial distribution at this point.
Nicole.
Yeah, if I could just respond. And I think I didn't specifically say, or I don't know how I phrased it in that slide. I think I did say diverse, but I didn't necessarily mean demographically diverse. I meant diverse in the way that people think about issues, what issues are priorities for them, and the way that they approach problems, diversity in the way that they think, not necessarily a demographic diversity, although that may be a benefit from doing ranked choice voting. But because we're focusing on a lower threshold, we want to represent a section of the city, that's where the diversity is coming from. We're getting more input from a lower number of people, yes. So in a sense, the choice is, do you want candidates who across the board have broad support, 40% threshold, or do you want candidates who maybe meet a lower threshold and potentially have more differing opinions?
Very, very, very thoughtful. So I would be concerned, based on what Ms. Davis was saying, Mayor Davis was that strategic voting or bullet voting. I don't really understand it, but still, it seems like there is a certain level of nuance that's required in looking through and understanding ranked choice voting, where some people might understand exactly how they want to use this in order to advance particular candidates for demographics or geography or any number of reasons, while other people might not really get that. They would just see this choice, and there's a couple of people who they want, and there are others, and they just, should I make them number 2 or number 3? Should it be onions and black olives, or,
Yeah, yeah.
or both? So I can see how it could be challenging, and you might end up with more spoiled ballots, or it might be easier to kind of skew things somehow for some people, and other people wouldn't pick up on that nuance. And so it's a little complicated. I think we could maybe work on the wording. Mr. Roberts?
I just want to say that I don't think that 4-year terms promotes any kind of diversity on the council. So you can't go both ways.
Thank you. Mr. Orleans?
New Orleans resident. History is important and also very useful, and it shouldn't be mischaracterized. It's my understanding that in 2009, the ACLU nor Prince George's branch of the NAACP did not sue the city of Greenbelt. They did not even threaten to sue the city of Greenbelt. What was suggested was that they may have to sue the city of Greenbelt if council did not make some changes to better reflect the demographic population of Greenbelt. History is also important in this regard. It's been more than 20 years since council was first urged to consider ranked choice voting. I'm glad finally the council's now at least considering putting it on the ballot as an advisory question. But before it should do that, council should have a clearer understanding of whether it's going to entertain amending the charter to have election districts. That would influence the kind of participation that ranked choice voting could appropriately influence, more so than simply saying we're going to have ranked choice voting in a at-large election. I have a question with regard to the one page in this handout tonight that reflects the Board of Elections, and let me say I appreciate all the work that the Board of Election has been doing recently on these various questions. I'm sometimes able intermittently to have a connection to those meetings, and when I'm on the meeting, I like it. I'm happy to be on the meeting. When I'm disconnected, I'm not so happy. The board is suggesting that if there is to be a change to election districts, some members of council will be elected from districts, and remaining members will be at large. I don't know if this is intended to go on the ballot and if it's to be approved by council to go on the ballot this way, but that's even more confusing than ranked choice voting. If we're going to have election districts, all members of council should be elected from their district. The only potentially at-large position should be that of mayor. And that's been suggested in the past. I would agree with that. Finally, there's apparently going to be an advisory question, should council members' term be extended from 2 years to 4 years, and then should there be a recall if it's extended to 4 years? I think there should be a recall recall opportunity currently with 2-year terms, and since I've been advocating a return to 1-year annual elections, there should be a recall potentially available to the residents, even if it was the term was only 1 year. I hope there will be more discussion before this goes to the ballot.
Thank you, thank you. To be clear, the Board of Elections did not make a recommendation on ranked choice voting. So you recommended that council discuss the issue and make some decisions.
Correct. I mean,
Discuss the issue.
Right. This is a presentation to give you more information about ranked choice voting, whether it's an appropriate advisory question to have on the ballot. Ultimately, if it goes to an advisory question, it's the voter's choice.
Thank you, thank you. Please, go ahead.
Joan Estenson, Old Greenbelt. As you pointed out, Mayor Jordan, there is a little
One second.
Is that on?
Yeah.
Okay. Start over. Joan Estenson from Minneapolis. Excuse me. From Greenbelt, Old Greenbelt, originally from Minneapolis. I think that there are things, even though Minneapolis is just a tad bigger than Greenbelt, that we could learn from Minneapolis. And I was a city election worker for 10 or 11 elections, 2 of which were municipal elections, which had ranked choice voting. So on a practical basis, the people who came in to vote, and we have a 45-day early voting period, their 2 questions were, do I have to vote for 3 candidates? Which was, of course, no. And can I vote for the same person? Pointed out, because it sort of defeats the purpose. Okay. And Nicole, I appreciate the presentation because it answered some questions I have, but it also made me realize that, as the previous speaker said, if you have wards, or if you have 7 at-large positions, it will change the way ranked choice voting will work. So I think that decision should be made first before deciding on ranked choice voting. I do strongly believe in ranked choice voting. There are advantages for the voters. They're not wasting a ballot by voting for someone who has no chance of winning, because for their second choice, they can vote for somebody acceptable. So it's not a matter of voting for their first choice necessarily as the person they like the best. They may want to support somebody who has no chance of winning. But my main point is the methodology would be different either way.
Hey, thank you for that perspective. I can't really think of anybody in Greenbelt who runs who has no chance of winning. But needless to say, I really appreciate the research that has gone into your presentation, and really all of the work that the Board of Elections has been doing on behalf of the residents of Greenbelt. It's really a powerful thing, and I think all of council appreciates just how much work and how much thought really goes into these referrals that come from the City Council. So I think we're all very grateful. The next step, though, in our process is we would actually have to take the discussion from tonight to a work session.
I mean, this is a work session.
To a council meeting. Thank you so much. And we would discuss it some more and actually vote on these ballot questions. So I know we asked the question recently, when would be the drop dead date for making decisions on these ballot questions?
We would like to have the questions by September at the latest. Right. Is that what we discussed Monday?
So we've got a little time, and I know Greenbelters read the Greenbelt News Review and watch these sessions. So I suspect that we'll probably get a few emails and notes from folks with their thoughts. So that's the direction that I would like to go in. To definitely have a decision way before September. But I think we need to let this percolate just a little bit. This question about, should we be looking at the district question before we consider ranked choice voting, just how not to overload our voters with ballot questions. Mr. Roberts, perhaps you can give us some perspective, or Ms. Davis. Typically, how many ballot questions might we have on a ballot? Board of Elections, is it usually one or two?
That as well as I do. How many have you supported over the years? How many?
Well, it seems like we usually just have one or two. Often it's just one. Yeah. Mayor Davis was saying sometimes none, and the survey, the resident survey that we've done in the past, along with the elections, this question has appeared. Other questions frequently appear on that.
I would like to say that I think it would be very interesting if you're going to put this thing on about 4-year terms, to also put one on right next to it about should there be term limits. I don't know that I'm in favor of term limits, but it would be very interesting to give the voters that choice and see how it comes out.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem?
Well, I believe that you mentioned that the Board of Elections maybe would want to do a little bit more revision of the language, and I think that this was still sort of a draft.
Yeah, I mean, we're willing to take, public and council notes into consideration for how, if you have thoughts about how the wording is confusing or where we need to put the emphasis for that question in order to give people a clear understanding of what they're deciding on. I think we're open to that.
It seems like it might be a good idea, and I don't see anyone from the News Review here tonight, but I think that could be helpful to get the draft language out there and get some public feedback about, whether they find it confusing or how they would recommend, what issues confuse them, and then maybe get some revisions at the next Board of Elections meeting in preparation for voting in July or August. If we choose to put it on there. I just think that this is one where getting more brains on it could be helpful, and asking more people, hey, read this. Do you understand this? What is confusing?
And it has to be readable. So we have Greenbelters at all different levels. So the reading comprehension really needs to be perhaps the 10th grade level, I believe, is the standard. Is it 7th?
Usually 7th or 8th.
Okay, well, and of course, the Board of Elections, you mentioned you hadn't really voted on this. So we can talk it
No,
over.
this was simply just an example of what you could put, but it's not been voted on.
Definitely appreciate it. Mr. Orleans has an additional comment before we wrap up.
Thank you. I will forever believe it's a bad practice of democracy when elections are all about the candidates. A good practice of democracy, a better practice, elections are all about the people.
Yes.
It's the electorate
Yes.
that has to do the fundamental role in elections. It has been suggested, regrettably again, from a member of council that, and I certainly understand the reasoning, if there were to be a question on the ballot, should council terms be extended to 4 years from 2 years, then necessarily there should also be a question on the ballot, or should we have term limits in Greenbelt? I've said before, I'll say again, I'll die believing that we have organic term limits now. It's just up to the people to unelect the folks that they've previously elected. I'm opposed to inorganic term limits. Any voter, all voters have a right, I think they make a mistake virtually every election, but they have the right to vote for whomever they want to vote for. So if Jay Davis were still on the ballot in another 10 years, people have a right to vote for her. If Emmett Jordan is not successfully negotiated a higher position for himself and he's on the ballot in another 10 years, then people have a right to vote for him. They're making a mistake, I believe, but they have that right. So to have inorganic term limits is a mistake. It's a denial of the right of the people to vote for whom they would like to do so.
Thank you. And of course, we do have a write-in slot on our ballots, so people can still vote for Jay Davis, Ed Putins. Hey, but once again, all kidding aside, I really, really want to thank you for all of the work that you do and just the preparations for the election that are coming up very soon. I know you're and the city clerk, I know, and the city administration all working very, very hard. It's a tremendous lift. Appreciate it so much. And on the pizza question, if you'd like to have some pizza, I could forego the pepperoni, and we can try pineapples. I don't know if the pineapples would work with black olives.
I think we'll have a diverse opinion about what toppings people like.
There you go.
We can do a practice ranked choice of voting election with pizza toppings to help people understand the process.
That's actually not a bad idea.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. If there are no further comments from council and there's nobody online, let's go ahead and move on to next topic, information items. I just wanted to ask the city manager about these incredible rains that we're having. It was just pouring today. It seems like it's going to rain some more tomorrow, and the amount of rain that's coming down is just phenomenal. So I've gotten word, actually I have a photograph over at the Three Sisters Garden by the Spring Hill Lake Recreation Center. It's flooded pretty badly. So I'm just wondering if you can give us an update. I know when it rains very, very hard, Public Works will try and clean out the storm drains in various locations. Don't know how much more rain we'll be getting, but do you have anything to report?
On the, I'll check with the team tomorrow and Friday to make sure that we do our rounds and clean out the storm drains that have been identified as critical drains that create backups in the community. So I'll make sure that that gets done. In terms of the rain overall, the COG membership received a recommendation from the committee reviewing the drought status. And today just happened that we received the recommendation, so it was sent to the chief administrative officers for consideration. Given the amount of rain that we're getting, we're not going to oppose lifting the drought. I think the water reserves are being backfilled. So while it's unfortunate to get it all at once, it's much needed rain to help replenish aquifers and drinking water sources.
Yeah, at the COG Council of Governments board meeting last week, the topic came up briefly. And, believe it or not, even with all the rain, some of the aquifers in some areas still have not gotten enough rain throughout the season. So, but it's come down pretty hard. And at the Spring Hill Lake Recreation Center with the new playground, there really is more flooding than usual. So if there's anything we can do, any drains or any thought that can be put into getting more sunshine, we'll have to definitely look into it.
We'll take a look. It's obviously there are things we can do. Are they worth investing the resources? We can have the water pumped out, but I think the system, as you're familiar with the area, there's storm drainage system that's been designed around the playground. That this is a good way to inspect to see if it's working.
Very good, Mr. Roberts.
I noticed that the apartments that were by the mobile station there, they were about that far from being flooded again. Did they flood? Well, when I got there, it was just like right up to the top. Yeah, I don't think it quite got up. It was right there. Didn't actually. I don't think it went actually into the apartments, but it was right there. I mean, it was. But after it stopped raining, it went down pretty rapidly. But I think most of the problem there is that there's a lot of water that's being diverted from Garden Way, I think, down into that area. And I think that's the main problem. So I went and looked at where's all the water coming from. And it's clear that there's a lot of water coming from Garden Way. If you could divert that over, towards the center more, I think that would solve that problem because it's just too much.
I think that's true. I think the drain that's there at the underpass is just too small. We know that. We know the pipe is just too small.
Right, we know that that's too small. We've had engineering. One of the agreements that were made with Parkway Apartments is that lower apartments would not be leased out because we can't tear up that storm sewage and replace it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that update. Hopefully we'll see some sun. What's the weather prediction for tomorrow? Is it supposed to rain more? In the afternoon or all day?
I think this weekend the sun's supposed to
It's supposed to be hot at 90
starting on Friday, there's nothing but sun for the next 10 days.
Yeah.
So we'll dry out.
N-
And it's
Next,
gonna be like 100.
yes, next week we expect to be over 100 degrees, I believe, Tuesday or Wednesday. So we reviewed the weather forecast for next week because we are expecting, we'll open summer camps on Monday, and we had the issue with the youth center. So we closed the youth center. We have an inclement weather policy that it's a high heat. We bring the kids indoors. And given that we were looking at potentially not having the youth center open because of the damaged sewer line, we were concerned about the weather. Fortunately, tonight we had a really exceptional plumber come out and did survey and video inspection and a lot of work to identify the issues. The good news is we were able to get 2 big clogs open in the facility. The bad news is that we found the cast iron pipe corroded and it's created bellies underneath the slab in the youth center. So while the good news is we can operate on Monday, and we have to do some preventative maintenance at least monthly to keep the line clear until we figure out a permanent solution. A permanent solution is breaking the concrete and replacing the damaged pipe.
Sounds complicated. I know
And
they're
expensive.
Expensive.
So
They're
I'm
vendors.
just giving the heads up, I'm gonna come asking for money.
Okay. Well, at this time, we are going into an executive session. Mayor Pro Tem?
We need to do the special meeting first.
Oh. I hereby call this special meeting of the Greenbelt City Council to order. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Here.
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 Here,
I'm here, and the time is 8:32.
9:32,
9:32.
I move that council go into closed session in accordance with section 3-305B1 and 10 of the general provisions article of the annotated code of the public general laws of Maryland in the municipal building library to discuss the appointment, performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction, or any other personnel matter that affects one or more specific individuals, and 2, to discuss public security if the public body determines that public discussion would constitute a risk to the public or to public security, including 1, the deployment of fire and police services and staff, and 2, the development and implementation of emergency plans. The purpose of this meeting is 1, to discuss personnel matters, and 2, to discuss public security if the public body determines that the public discussion would constitute a risk to the public or to public security, including the development and implementation of emergency plans. In addition to council, City Manager Salmaron will be in the closed session, and I don't believe anyone else. And note that council will not return to open session following this closed session.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Ms. Pompey is seconded. Any discussion? Let's go ahead. If you could call the roll, City Clerk.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, that's 6-1. Thank you. 5 to 1. Thank you.